on this exact same truck nearly 25 years ago. This is more of a workshop. So yeah, you've got Castrol and Duckham's mobil oil. Okay, there are some clever people watching these videos. So well, morning folks, and welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. The weather is fine, so I will be nipping outside and catching up with a few little jobs to do out there. But beforehand, I thought I'd just talk about a few recent acquisitions here at OCC HQ. And I'm going to begin with this fantastic Ford V8 Pilot lubrication chart. Now, if you saw the video recently, you'll see I was talking about lubrication charts and showed one for the Standard 8. And Dennis, who used to own a V8 Pilot and kindly sent over a couple of books very recently, found this in his files, and he sent this one over and it arrived just yesterday. So what a treat to receive this lovely lubrication chart. As you can see, everything is Castrol related, Castrolese, heavy grease, and so on and so on. Castrol XL engine oil in the summer and Castrolite in the winter, because this was issued by C.C. Wakefield & Co., the company behind Castrol Motor Products, and this is an original lubrication chart, one of presumably thousands they produced well into the 1950s. So yeah, what a treat to receive this. So big thanks to Dennis for this. Now, as regulars to the channel may have spotted, we are both, me and Harley, quite keen on old toy cars, and from time to time we end up buying one or two. I don't actively go looking for them, but when we go to these antique centres, quite often there are loads to choose from. I couldn't resist this fantastic Triang Jeep. I don't think it's particularly rare. I think there's usually quite a few for sale at any one time, but this one just struck me as being in really, really nice original condition. I know the lighting's not great in here, but hopefully you get the general idea. It's a clockwork toy. Maybe some of you watching this remember having one of these back in the day, but it's just super original, still with the original stencil lettering and the star on the bonnet. It's just in the kind of condition that we really, really love. Many of these that you see for sale possibly missing the fold down screen. That often snaps off because it's quite delicate. It's only held on with these tiny thin little hinges, but it's just a bonny little thing, still with a spare wheel on the back that often falls off. And these jerry cans, more often than not, are missing as well. And it's not surprising, it just sits in the bracket there. How that has survived is anyone's guess. It's not that easy to fit in, but yeah, what a treat that is. But that pales into insignificance compared to one of Harley's recent finds. Let's just go and get that. Because while we were at an antiques fair only recently, he found this Mercedes, a tin plate Mercedes Grand Prix car. Now, this is a beautiful, beautiful original 1950s or possibly early 1960s toy car. These are spectacular. Look at the size of it. I mean, hopefully you can see the scale of it. If I put the Jeep next to it, you can see. And the Jeep isn't particularly small, but yeah, that Mercedes is a real Bobby Dazzler. Beautifully made, real attention to detail, these beautiful hubcaps. Some of these were battery powered, some of them were friction wind-up rather. Look at that, even down to the proper tartan interior that Mercedes racing cars of the mid-1950s had. I think the screen has been changed at some time, the little piece of perspex there, but otherwise this is in super original condition, and he beat me to it by just a few paces. He spotted it seconds before I did, so he was able to nab this one. But I don't mind too much. Mainly, I don't mind too much because about 20 years ago I bought one too. I don't think the driver's original. I'm not quite sure what driver they would have had. And this one is very, very similar. This is a battery-powered one. There are some differences. This has got a gear selector You can just about see that in there, hopefully. We'll get the light on that. Still with the same interior, but those are just great, and to see the two of them together is just a real joy. These are modelled on the Mercedes-Benz W196 of so circa 1955. 1955 was the season that Stirling Moss raced in the team, in the Mercedes Grand Prix team, alongside legendary driver Juan Manuel Fangio. And in fact, Moss won the Aintree Grand Prix in 1955 behind the wheel of a W196 Mercedes, just like this one. Of course, 1955 was the year that Mercedes retired from active motorsport altogether following the tragedy, the terrible crash that took place at Le Mans in 1955. And yeah, at the end of the season they pulled out altogether. And that is roughly the era that these two Mercedes date from. But yeah, what a treat. Now, you do see them for sale. They pop up on certain auction sites on a fairly regular basis. If you do a search for JNF Mercedes-Benz, you'll see what I mean. But most of them, in fact all of the other ones I've ever seen, are like mine, in silver. I have never seen one in this grey colour that Harley's got here, which makes this, I think, quite unusual. I've never seen one in the metal before, and I don't think I've seen one advertised online before that's this very unusual grey, as you can see. It's a very different shade. So that's a bit of a treat. So that makes this even rarer than it already is. And these are rare toys in their own right. But yeah, I just thought I'd show you a couple of the recent finds. And it just gives you an idea of the kind of thing we go looking for when we visit these antique centres and antiques markets and so on. But yeah, what a treat to see those two together. It could be Aintree, 1955. Well, no prizes for guessing who visited a local bargain shop just yesterday. Got a few cheap bits and bobs. These are always useful things because it's not unknown for things to fall off, as we demonstrated only last Sunday on the way to the Crew Heritage Centre. These are always handy as well. They don't last forever, but they're just useful things to have. It appears I already had one, but never mind. Always using them, always useful things, and for £1.29 a pack, you can't really go too far wrong, can you? A few paint scrapers as well, they're useful. And a bit of black paint. It's not exactly great quality stuff, but for the job I have in mind for it, it'll do just perfectly. But I think the first thing I'm going to do today is have a look at the Dodge pickup. Right, well, here we have the mischievous windscreen wiper blade. Now, I'm not sure if you can see how this goes together. That sort of hooks, and that little hole there, that sort of hooks in there and slides in, and then that locates that. When we actually picked it up off the road, or when Harley picked it up off the road, it was all together. I think this has just come apart while it was in the back of the truck. This is how it secures onto the spindle that sticks out of the front of the cab above the windscreen. You literally push it on and this tightens down. Now, I think this probably wants a little bit of attention, maybe free it up a little bit. It's quite tight, but I think we'll just give that a little bit of a TLC. Someone did point me in the direction of a conversion that you can get, like a little conversion kit. What it allows you to do is, it's an adapter, and it allows you to fit slightly later style wiper arms with the slightly larger diameter spindle with the grooves in. So we may actually look at getting one of those. Don't think I've ever heard of a rainbow blade before. That's all with the aid of a lovely spear point spanner. A little cracker that is. The wiper is back in place and fully tightened up. Obviously the proof is in the pudding, and we'll need to have another rainy day, but we don't take it out in the rain very often anyway, so it'll probably be a little while before that happens. I might well look at getting one of those adapters and just adapting it so that we can have a slightly different arrangement, but it feels pretty tight to me, so I don't think we'll have any problems with that now, which is good news. Now, I had thought today I might get this one out and give it a wash, because at some point I would like to give it the boiled linseed oil treatment, and it needs to be clean before thinking about doing that. But yeah, however, I think I'd like to spend a bit of time on this one. It hasn't run in, I don't know, a couple of months maybe. I do try and fire it up fairly regularly, But it would be nice to hear it run again and just warm things through again, especially this time of year. You know, I know a lot of people say don't run vehicles unless you're taking them for a nice long drive at the same time, and I get that. But also, it is important. I'd rather sacrifice a bit of water going into the exhaust, but it is important to get heat round things and just drive out moisture from the nooks and crannies within the engine bay and just everywhere under the bonnet and underneath to a certain extent, because the heat does waft backwards and dry things out. And at this time of year everything gets so damp that it's not really good at all. So a little bit of heat getting around things I don't think is a bad thing at all, and it does give you a chance to exercise the brakes and the clutch by moving it backwards and forwards. So yep, there are downsides to firing up things if you're not actually taking them on the road at the same time, but equally there are upsides as well. And I think, as with most things, it's just about finding a balance. So I did charge the battery up on this a little while ago. Now, when it sits for quite a long time, the fuel tends to run back into the fuel tank. There are two, I think they're 20-gallon each tanks, one on this side, one on the other side. It's only this one plumbed in at the moment. Originally you could switch over, there is a switch over tap on the bulkhead, but in a bid to simplify the fuel system, and I was having a few problems with it running ages ago, I just switched it over so that it's just running on the one tank, just to keep things simple. And to be honest, it's not like it does long trips or anything like that. So one tank for now will do the job. The fuel is probably a little bit old in there, so I'm not quite sure how well it'll start, but I think what we'll do to begin with is just prime it up. And by saying prime it up, what I do, I get a little bit of fuel hose and a funnel and disconnect the pipe from the tank into the pump, which you probably can't see, but it's just down there, and just literally pour some fuel down, just so that there is some fuel up at this end while it's dragging the fuel up from the tank. And I think we'll probably give it a bit of a clean as well. I'm not too worried about super clean engine bays, but it is a little bit dusty, so I think we'll give it a little bit of a sprucing up today, just to keep it looking nice. Right, where is the small funnel and bit of hose pipe? I think there's so much clutter in here. Let's go and have a look. Yes, I think this one, hopefully it's got a clip on the end, which will do, a Jubilee clip, that'll do. Not ideal for fuel piping, I know, but it'll do for the purposes of priming up the pump, so that'll do the job just nicely. So let's get round here. Ooh. So I'll just get on with that and then I'll report back once it's done. Okay, well that's all primed up now. Ironically, I've actually got a video of me, one of the first videos here on the channel, is doing this exact same job on this exact same truck nearly 25 years ago, priming up the fuel system to get it running. Of course, back then they used to keep it in the barn over in Poynton in Cheshire, because there wasn't room back at my folks' place to store something that's 26 feet long. And this is why we actually moved here 20 plus years ago, because it had room to store this mighty old lorry. So anyway, let's see if there are any signs of life. The battery I have charged, but it's not the newest battery on the block, so will it work? I'm not quite sure, but let's see. This truck, although visually pretty similar to its smaller compatriot, this is about 7 years older. This is 1940. I've done a full history video about this truck elsewhere on the channel, so I won't repeat myself too much. But it's been with me since 1995, this house. Ooh. So it's all very sort of familiar, but different in here. So we'll turn the electrics on. There are two battery kill switches down there, one for the 12 volt system and one for the 6. Ignition. Choke. We won't need the hand throttle. Let's just give it a go, see if at least it'll turn over. She goes. the fuel in the tank is really old, so it might take a little while to even out a bit. I shall be pulling the fuel up from the fuel tank now. It's a thirsty old beast, this one. It's a good job I opened the doors. Let's warm it through a little bit, then I might move it outside. Right. Yeah, you don't want to spend too long in here with this running. That fuel smells very, very old. Whoa. Let's get that choke pushed in a bit more, I think. And then we'll abandon ship. Maybe we should be giving this one a wash today, certainly needs it. Yeah, she's definitely smoothing out a little bit now just as it warms through. As far as I know, this is probably the oldest original race car transporter pretty much anywhere. It was a wreck when I found it in mid-1995. And the story of its rebuild featured on the old classic car site many years ago. It's still on there, and there have been one or two videos talking about the history of this old truck. It started out with the RAF as an RAF crew bus on a bomber base somewhere in the Second World War. And then, after the war, it was sold off at a disposal sale, and that's when Dennis Poore, who used to own this, bought it. And he used it to carry his ex-Nuvolari Alfa Romeo, this car here. Oops. That's the car that it used to carry. So it's certainly got quite the illustrious history, and it's the history of this thing that makes me so keen on it. That we don't take it out all that often isn't really an issue. It was all about trying to save this thing, because another winter outside I think would have seen it off for good. It was in a terrible state. The sides were collapsing, the back doors were falling off, and it was full of rubbish. So really the priority was just to see it saved. Okie dokie, I've cleared the junk out of the way, so let's see if she'll actually move. This has a 5-speed gearbox, power brakes, so for the age, 1940, and these came out in 39. For its age, it's actually quite an advanced truck. Compare that to the trucks, the old lorries that were being built here in the UK, and they were pretty rudimentary by comparison. So yeah, these were quite advanced. Of course, they were designed to go coast to coast over in the USA, so they had to be able to cover the miles. First speed is really a granny gear. It's very, very low indeed, so you don't tend to use it hardly ever. You usually start off in second. But anyway, let's pop the bonnet down, see if we can get it outside, and I think we'll give it a wash down. It's amazing just how dusty it gets sat in here. Well, it's looking like a good drying day, so I think we'll go and grab the ladders over there, several buckets of water. We'll give her a rinse down. It does take a little while, so I'll report back once it's done. It's a job I've been meaning to do for quite some time, so what better opportunity than today? Plenty of steam from the water landing on the hot radiator, but that's not a concern. One of my favourite things about this old truck is the history of it. I've been researching it since 1995, and all manner of really fun stories turned up. One guy got in touch just a few years ago, and he used to work for Connaught, the Grand Prix company, and for a time the gent who used to own this and carry his Grand Prix Alfa in it, Dennis Poore, he was involved with the Connaught Grand Prix team in the early 1950s, and on one memorable trip they were heading off up to Scotland for a race, I think at Charterhall. Poore was in this with his two mechanics, and the Connaught guys were in their own transporter, and they decided to have a race up to Charterhall, and this of course was long before the days of motorways and that kind of thing, and apparently it was all quite hairy. On one occasion they were up somewhere near the Lake District, and they were heading down a hill on a single track road, and they were side by side, and there was a narrow bridge at the bottom, and it was a case of playing chicken to see who would brake first and let the other one through. I think in the end the guys in the Dodge braked first, and the Connaught transporter nipped through en route up to Charterhall. So it's just all these sort of stories are the things that I've been able to amass during my time of nearly 30 years of owning this unique old vehicle. There's nothing else like it. It's the only one that survives. A few of these were built in the war. The bodies were also fitted to Fords and Austin chassis, again used as crew buses. But there's only one of those surviving. There's a Fordson WOT aircrew bus over at East Kirby, where the Lancaster is being rebuilt and restored, hopefully back to flight. But there are no Dodges like this. As far as I know, there are no original transporters like this from the early post-war years. Of course, back in those days you only had to be moderately wealthy as opposed to spectacularly wealthy to go motor racing, and lots of these old buses were converted, especially lots of ex-military vehicles are converted to be used as racing car transporters, and that's the case here. And this is pretty much the sole survivor, I think, of the vehicles that were used by some of these private and semi-private racers following World War II. Of course, fuel was still rationed at the time, so it was no easy feat to even get the fuel to go motor racing. The guy who used to own this, he was at the first meeting at Goodwood in 1948. So this has got loads of Goodwood history as well, which I was so chuffed to take it back to the revival in 2015, and it was great just to drive it through the paddock and return it to one of its former haunts. Perhaps one of the most famous racing car transporters of all is the Comma, the Ecuria Cos Comma, which is an incredible looking vehicle, of course immortalised. I think was it Corgi did the blue Comma race car transporter, and how many school children after watching a race maybe at Silverstone went home and played with their transporter, their Corgi Ecuria Cos Comma transporter. But of course that Comma fine vehicle as it is a young whippersnapper compared to this old girl. That is 1960, and I think there's somewhere from the 1950s, there's the old van wall transporter tucked away somewhere, and the Leyland that was used by BRM. But they are both young whippersnappers compared to this, which dates to 1940. So if you know of any other original sort of in period used transporters from this kind of era, please let me know in the comments. Of course, until not that long ago, we also had the Commer Superpoise transporter here, as used by Brian Crute to carry the Sphinx Allard. In the 1960s he used to use that, but I decided that was one lorry too many, so that went off to a new home. And last time I looked, it was back up for sale on Facebook Marketplace of all places. So if you want an original transporter, that old girl dates to 1950, and that comes with a fair bit of history as well, which is the reason that I saved it all those years ago from a barn in Somerset. Go and have a look on Facebook, because it's still on there. Last time I looked, at least at the time of recording this video. So we'll just carry on rinsing this one off, and then we'll break out the sponge and the soap and give it a proper wash down, and then hose it off again. And on this slightly breezy day, it can be drying off, while I tend to probably just give the interior a bit of a dust down as well, and just a bit of a clean and a general spruce up all over. A number of the old transporters that used to exist in the 40s and 50s have been recreated. The high-speed Mercedes race car transporter, that was recreated. The original was scrapped back in the 50s or the 1960s, I think. And some of the pre-war Auto Union and Mercedes race car trucks have also been recreated and appear at various historic race meetings. But this, as far as I know, is probably the oldest original race car truck that was used in the 40s and 50s to survive. If you know different, please let me know in the comments. But this and the trailer that go with it are really pretty unique now. Of course, one day it would be really nice to reunite it with the main car that it carried. It did carry a number of different vehicles, race cars, in the late 40s and early 1950s, before the owner retired from racing in 1955 and everything got squirreled away. But the main car was that Grand Prix Alfa that I showed you a picture of a little earlier in this video. As far as I know, it resides somewhere in America. I'm not quite sure where. It's sold at the Bonhams Goodwood Revival sale, I think in 2013. It went for about £6 million, if I remember correctly. And it's disappeared into a collection somewhere stateside. Now, whether it'll come out racing again or not, I'm not quite sure. The previous owner, Peter Giddings, I did meet and correspond with via letter. I did meet him at the Goodwood Festival of Speed in the late 1990s, and he actually had the car there. We didn't know it was going to be there, so I was able to have a sit in it and introduce one of the old team mechanics who I had with me to the then owner of the Alfa. So that all worked out quite nicely. It was a bit of a surprise. But yeah, one day it would be nice to reunite the Dodge with that lovely twin supercharged straight 8 3.8 litre Grand Prix Alfa Romeo. Such a famous car, such an incredible sounding car. If you look for videos elsewhere on YouTube of the Alfa 8C-35, you'll see what I mean. It sounds absolutely phenomenal. A real deep bellow from that glorious, barely silenced straight 8 engine. Absolutely incredible car, and it must have sounded phenomenal back in the day. It used to run, after the war, it used to run different superchargers, much larger superchargers than was standard. I think it's been returned to standard, but the noise that must have made sitting next to this truck, and indeed running inside the back of it sometimes when they were tuning it up on a rainy day, must have just been something to behold. Well, there we go. It's all been cleaned off apart from the wheels. I'll do those after lunch, but now it can be drying off while we have a quick bite to eat. You'll notice it's not particularly shiny where it's dried off. And that was always the intention. I've got some old black and white photographs of it back in the day in the sort of late 40s, early 1950s, and it was far from shiny. It was just an old truck that was used to carry a glorious old racing car, and this would have just been driven into the ground. So the idea all along was for it never to look shiny as a boiled sweet. The idea was that it had like an oily, raggy sort of sheen to it, because back in the day they would have just wiped it over with a rag of diesel oil, probably at the beginning of the year, and that would have done until the following winter. Anyway, there we go. It can be drying off now. It's a nice breezy, slightly sunny day. I don't like it too sunny because sometimes the water dries a bit strange and you get like sort of blobs over the paintwork which take a little while to fade away. But yeah, for the time of year I think we can be pretty grateful of the weather we have today. What a lovely old girl. I remember stumbling across this thing back in 1995 and thinking, what an incredible looking old truck that was. The styling, I just think it's incredible. This would have come over in 1940 as a kit of parts, and it's Dodge up to the top of the screen, and the doors and the screen back was all fitted and bodied by Mulliners of Birmingham, the people more often associated with coach bodies either side of the Second World War, and they also bodied a great number of road cars like Daimlers and Lanchesters in particular. Yeah, that can just be drying off now. I need to clean the wheels and I'll give the interior a bit of a clean up, get a nice damp rag and just go around it all. And it can be drying off and we'll put it away a little bit later. We go into the gloom of the garage, and what's Harley up to today? Oh, old number plate. So what's the story with this then?
I'm trying to get the old brackets.
Oh, that's a lovely old... So let's just have a look at this outside and get some light on the proceedings. Well, that is old, isn't it? So it's been repainted, isn't it, at some point? So it's what? DU X or Y 76 something 3. Yeah, so that's certainly quite the survivor. I mean, that must date back to what, the 1920s. So that's going to go in Ned or Fred? In Fred. Going in Fred the shed, the newer shed of the two. Hopefully Ned won't be jealous. So I guess there are quite a few in there. So I think what we need to do, in order to hang it up on the wall or screw it up on the wall, we need to move these brackets. Now these square-headed, I'm not sure what you call them, nuts or whatever's, they're just spinning away, and I think they're probably heavily corroded. So I think you reckon one of them might come off. So we'll endeavour to remove them properly, but if they won't come off, then I think we'll have to resort to angle grinder and lots of noise and sparks. But if we can avoid that, we will do. Right, go on then, see if we can get that freed up.
This is the one that's turning.
Right, so what do you reckon if you can wedge that under there? If I hold that, see if you can, and see if that'll actually turn or not. Is it gonna? I think it's the whole thing's turning. I think you might need to grab the head of the screw in the vise possibly.
Right, it's just turning this side. It's really soft.
Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, I mean that one's got a bit more about it. The slot is better on that one.
This one gave me more hopes. I've tried more with that one.
Yeah, it's a bit more mullered, but I think we'll just have to chop that off. They're not going to come off easily, and you risk damaging the plate even more. So I think it'd be easy just to get the angle grinder with a cutting disc and just go zoom, zoom, and cut those off. So let's go and see where it is. There we go, the angle grinder made short work of that. So all we need now is some nice, what do you want?
Old style self-tapping screws.
Some old.
Usually I'm not that bothered, but I think with this one...
You want some old screws, either some old dome-headed screws or some old wood screws or something like that. But yeah, something dome-headed would look quite in keeping with something like that, I think. So let's go and have a look in the old stock room and see what we can find. Let's see if we can find something suitable in these many old boxes of old screws. These old OXO cube boxes are perfect for the job, and there are several of them around, including more there. But you want something dome-headed, don't you? Let's see what we can see. Yeah, they're quite big actually, aren't they?
Yeah, basically. Quite big. I mean, I could just put them in there.
Yeah, it'd be nicer to use up those holes, wouldn't it, just to fill them up a little bit.
Basically, something that looks exactly like what they were before.
Yeah, something old and ratty.
Yeah.
Not modern plastic ones then.
No, sir.
If you've not seen the earlier videos on this channel, and indeed Harley's car traction channel, then you might not know that this is Ned the Shed, and alongside a recent arrival is Fred the Shed, yet to be painted. This is Harley's workshop area, and he's just got to decide now where he's going to mount this.
It's gone there.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, nice thick wood there, great. And it'll sort of trap things there, so they won't keep falling off. So that'd be quite a good result actually. So this is your workshop, isn't it? This is more of a workshop, and the other one, Ned the Shed, is more for sort of display of interesting old things. This is a mix of interesting old things to look at, but mainly keeping free space for actually working on stuff. So that'll just about go on there, won't it, I think? Yeah, that'll look pretty good. And we've got some dome-headed screws. The screws are a little bit on the small side, but we don't want them too long. So I would suggest putting one in and then figure out.
I have hung stuff up before.
I know you have. I know you know what you're doing.
I've done a lot of it recently.
Yes, you have been quite busy. Lovely California plates there. 2 matching pairs actually, which is nice.
Yeah.
Originally 1963, they're both 63, aren't they? 1963. So really you need to get a 1963 car one day, and then you could just screw these onto the back.
American car, ideally.
Oh, yeah. And that would be quite appropriate, wouldn't it? So how low are you going? How low are you going? It's quite low. You want to go a bit higher than that, I would suggest. Just because you're quite low to the bottom of the piece of the wood, so you might split. It might split this. So if you come like a little bit higher up on both of them.
Alright.
Alright. Well, you don't want to split the wood, do you? You're just going to start the holes a little bit. Lovely screwdriver there, sir.
It won't go down the back. I'll take my gloves off.
Yeah, you don't need gloves. Gloves are for wimps. Right. Nice.
Cleaning up the odd tins,
Yeah, nice old dome-headed screw there. Notice, slotted. None of this Phillips or Posi drive stuff here. This is what they call black japanned. These black finish. That's it. If you just hold it and go in square, and then, yeah, that's called black japanned finish. That is. Did we decide what this was off?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't remember seeing this tape measure before. The A1 tape measure, made in England. Is it a car boot sale, is it? None of this funny metric stuff on here. That's really nice, though. Yeah, that looks well there. Don't forget to get the slots nicely lined up.
Could I?
Yes. This is a lovely little spirit level as well, incorporating a 4-inch ruler. Now that must have been made for a specific purpose, for a specific trade, where you would routinely have to check that things were level and measure things, but only up to 4 inches in length. But what would that have been? Answers on a postcard, please. Yeah, so what's that off then? Could be off a Mini or something like that, I suppose. The earlier ones have metal plates that are riveted on, the Westlake patents, and the Austin badge are riveted on. So this is slightly later.
Could this still be usable?
Oh yeah, it's perfectly usable.
It's not a mechanical thing, it's just
No. So that'll actually clean up because it's got most of its proper BMC green paint on it. So I think with a bit of white spirit and then an oily rag, I think that'll come up looking quite presentable, and you can hang it up. There, I think that'll keep him quiet for a little bit. Right, where's he gone? Right, okay, there you go.
It's actually not going on badges.
Yeah, but if you dab some of this onto your cloth, and then it'll sort of shift the more stubborn grime. And then
take out the stickers then?
No, not if you're careful. No, just obviously tread carefully. But if you use this on any of the stubborn, oily stuff, then it should come up looking alright, I think. So how's it coming?
You're doing a good job, to be fair.
There he is. It's looking quite nice. There's a fair bit of green paint on there, so that'll look very, very smart, I think. Noisy motorbike. Make that noisy motorbikes. Yeah. Okay, now it's the turn of the cap. I like the way they've got all the different brands of oil on them. And you used to have like a little plastic thing, and you'd rotate it and have it pointing at whichever oil. Let's go outside with that. So yeah, you've got Castrol and Duckham's, Mobil Oil, Shell, Filtrate, Energol and Sternol, and there's SO as well. Yeah, so that's quite a neat thing.
Filtrate?
Yeah, Filtrate.
Filtrate stuff is very rare now.
It is. And that'll just sit on there when you're finished. You're doing a grand job. This is what was a reconditioned cylinder head from an Austin 8, of all things, sort of just post-war or possibly pre-war. It's obviously seen a little bit of use since being reconditioned, but Harley's after bits and bobs to decorate and ned the shed with old interesting car parts, so this is going to find its way in there, I think. Yeah, lovely label on it there. Well, that's given it a pretty good scrubbing up, and it's just been drying off in the breeze. I've got a funny feeling it might rain fairly soon. I was going to bring the small pickup out and photograph them together, but I think given that it'll probably tip it down very, very soon, we'll just get this one put away while it's nice and dry, and we'll probably bring it out again on another day to give it the oily rag session. Yeah, that's looking a lot tidier now. Yeah, there we go, all tucked away, safe and sound, which is looking a lot better for that wash. Nice spring clean for the 1940 Dodge. At least she got a chance to dry off before being put away again. Anyway, that was quite a productive day, so thank you very much for watching the video. I'll let it carry on running for a little while yet, just keep the battery charged up, keep everything nice and supple and free, and I think we'll wrap this one up. So thank you for watching. Please check out some of the other videos. There are one or two now, well, there are several in fact, about the truck. So yeah, if you want to find out a little bit more about this truck, I'll include some links to videos that I've already put onto the channel which explain a little bit more about the history of it, where I found it and how it came to be restored. So thanks very much, and back soon. Bye for now. Okay, there are some clever people watching these videos. So, what is this gearbox off? It's been kicking around for years. I think I retrieved it when I bought the Austin 7 Special that I used to have way back in 2009, and it's been knocking around ever since. But can anyone identify it? Does it look familiar to anyone? It does turn. It does turn on the input shaft, which is there. So it is potentially a usable gearbox. Obviously once a good clean out, it's a bit grubby in there, there's no oil in it. Still got the dipstick on there, and it's only fairly small. Obviously that's where the clutch attaches to, and there's the throw out bearing in there. But what is this off? I'm very reluctant to throw anything away that could potentially be of use to somebody, but the first thing I need to do is try and find out which car this was fitted to. So if you've got any clues at all. Clearly it's got an open prop shaft as opposed to the torque tube like the Ford 8s and the 10s have. So it's not off those. But what is it off? Because I'm sure it's a usable, even if it's just as a spare for somebody. It seems a shame just to chuck it away. But I could do with making some space. So if you can weigh in and positively identify this old gearbox, that would be really, really handy.